Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. And today in Bible study, we looked at John chapter 6, 1 through 15, and verses 22 through 59. In these verses, we see Jesus do the feeding of the 5,000 and talk about what that means. Now, why is this important? Well, because John connects it immediately to Passover, which is our theme for this Lent. So, John in his gospel is unique in that he connects three Passovers to Jesus' life. He's not the only one to bring up this theme, obviously, but he likes to mark Jesus's ministry by the festivals that are going on around it. He does this often to highlight theological significance. So the question for today is, why did John feel to mention that this was around Passover? And the reason is because of what Jesus has to say and how he connects that to Passover and what Passover calls people to remember. So the story of the 5,000, feeding of the 5,000, you might be very familiar with it or you might not, but it's a story of how Jesus, with very little food, provides food for thousands of people, 5,000 plus amount of people. And so in the Gospel of John, you have this story take place. And the interesting thing is John builds it up by saying it was around, the Passover was near. So it's not Passover yet, but he wants people to be thinking about the Passover, what that might represent to this story. So as they go into it, right, Jesus sees these crowds. He wants to feed him. His disciples go, how is that possible? And then he knows that they're going to say that. They don't know where they're going to get the bread. Not only are they kind of out in the middle of nowhere, it's a lot of money, and it's Passover, which isn't immediately maybe to us, or it's preparing for Passover. It might not immediately be a clue to us, but for Passover, you had to do away with all of the leaven. You had to clean your house and get rid of all of the leaven there, right? As a symbolism of remembering that they had to leave Egypt without any leavened bread, right? So there's also like, where are we going to get it? How is that going to happen? And so what happens is Jesus provides the food. And of course, right, he provides food for people in the wilderness that should call our minds back to the Exodus. Now, that's not stated at this point explicitly yet, but you're going to see that that's the connection that people are drawing. People are aware of the connections that Jesus is making here. And this, of course, leads to people questioning him about, okay, who are you? Or are you the prophet? You see this like the people exclaim this, right? The prophet being this someone who is promised to be like Moses in Deuteronomy 18. And so after that, right, there's this belief that he is going to be a Messiah, but he's like a revolutionary. You see that begin to kind of happen at the end in like verse 15-ish. All right, and there's a walking on water. We skip that. Not because it's not important, it's interesting, but just because it's not immediately pertinent to our theme. So then it picks up and you have the bread of life discourse. And this is like why John builds this up, I think, more than the other gospels, because he wants to know what Jesus had to say about the things that he did. So what happens is during the night, they cross over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Tiberias. They go to Capernaum. Jesus is in a synagogue teaching there, and the crowd that was there yesterday that was fed by him shows up because they want food again, right? And Jesus knows that's why they're there. They're not there for spiritual nourishment. They're there for physical nourishment. They want their physical needs met. And Jesus does meet those needs, right? He met them the night before, but he's trying to make it clear to them that what matters more than physical needs is spiritual needs. But they keep misunderstanding or not understanding what he's saying and desire to have this bread. And Jesus eventually begins building on this, right? And he's taking this idea of from Psalm 78, where God provides bread from heaven, and also the idea of Isaiah, those who those who hunger will not hunger anymore, right? Those who are thirsty shall not thirst anymore. He's building off of these Old Testament ideas that are quoted in this passage to make a point about what he is doing. He's bringing this bread that never perishes. And so this is the connection, right? The connection with Passover is, what does Passover represent to the people, right? It represents the beginning of the time of Exodus. And so John wants us to be thinking, oh, this was in the air, right? People were thinking about these things. They're remembering the story, remembering what God has done for them, and how God has provided for them. And you'll notice that people ask, what do we do? Right? But the whole point of Jesus is that it's given for you. The bread from heaven was given for the people of Israel, and Jesus, as the true bread of heaven, is given to them, right? You don't do anything. And this is one of my favorite parts, right? The work of God is this: believe in the one he has sent. And that's what this whole passage is about. Oftentimes people like to make this about communion, and I'm not saying like it doesn't have allegory to communion or something like that, but you can see in the context of the passage, it's all about faith. And so when it comes to eating and drinking, which in the Old Testament, in those passages in Psalms and Isaiah, is linked to faith, having faith in God, right? To eat his flesh and drink his blood is to have faith in Jesus. That is the connection that he draws. And this causes a whole stir, and people understand that he's claiming divinity here. So, it seems like the people that are following him either like it or don't care, but the religious leaders really don't like it, which is why he can't go into Judea for the Passover, because they're trying to kill him. So he doesn't want to. He's not headed there yet, though he obviously will go there. So for us, right, when we see this, the Passover should remind us of faith, right? That we should hold to Jesus and remember who he is and what he provides for us, right? That the Passover was a gift of God for the people of Israel, and the manna in the wilderness was also a gift, right? They didn't do anything to deserve it. It's a free gift of God, and that continues throughout all of Scripture, even to today, as God still freely gives us his grace and produces faith in us. So that's what we talked about today. I hope you found that interesting. I will see you when I see you. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.